All right. I'm happy to have a legend in our field. Like, uh, my mentor's mentor, Adam Pelle's mentor, and probably like one of the best strength coach in the whole basketball field. Todd, right? Todd, can you like introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Eric. My name's Todd Wright. I just finished my 32nd year in some kind of high performance setting. 21 of those years was in college basketball. The majority of those at the University of Texas, where I was really blessed to be there. And during that stretch, we had some phenomenal players, and so I was really lucky to be with a number one, a great coach, and number two, have some incredible players. And then back in 2015, I was lucky to be recruited into the NBA, and I went into the NBA with the Philadelphia 76ers as a dual role, an assistant coach, and I was director of strength and conditioning and performance over there for 4 years. So from 2015 to 2019. Um, that was my inception into the NBA. And then in 2019, the LA Clippers recruited me to go out in another dual role as an assistant coach and vice president of player performance to grow their performance areas and oversee those processes and see if we could grow and just grow out those departments. And so I just recently finished with the Clippers, which a lot of people don't know, but I left the Clippers about 10 days ago and left on a great note with them. I got nothing but love in my heart for my time with the Clippers, but I felt like there was a time that maybe there was something else out there that will give me an opportunity to grow even more. And so I've recently left that role with the Clippers, and I am founder of a business in Austin, Texas called Train for the Game that I founded back in the early 2000s and then joined with my business partner. My business partner came in, who was my assistant at the University of Texas. Um, his name is Chris Braden, and we became partners, I think, in 2010. So in 2015, I left Austin to go to the NBA, and Chris and a handful of coaches that have been with me there for some over 20 years, and I have two or three that have been there 10 plus years. They've taken that business and grown it into one of the largest fitness and performance communities in the country. And so we have over 750 members. And so I was at a point in my career where I could see that this business was really growing, and I was really proud of what those people did to accomplish that. And I felt like maybe if I jumped in with them, jumped into the boat with them, that maybe we could even do something even more special. And so that's where I'm leaning towards right now, into that trajectory of the private sector. And we'll open some subsidiaries of some consulting, and maybe helping out the next generation of basketball players as they come up, and if any NBA teams have interest in understanding how to create infrastructures, performance infrastructures, and evaluating their employees, and injuries and different things like that, that we would be open to doing some of those things in the future. So that's kind of a little bit of me, and but I want to start out by complimenting you. You've done an amazing job of creating this podcast, and I think it really came out of the authenticity of you just being really curious to wanting to learn. And it's actually turned into one of the best performance podcasts that are out there, and it's become a major resource for me to continually grow and get better. And so I just want to give you flowers and say thank you for doing what you're doing.
No, thank you. Like you're the best. You mentored Adam, and then Adam mentored me. So, uh, I want to start by asking you this because I think I kind of asked you the same question when I was at LA visit you. So um obviously like Adam is a huge like mentor to me, he helped me a lot. And when I talk to Adam, he always mentioned like you're his mentor. And in our space, in our field, like not just Adam. Cliff, um, Hodge, uh, yeah, Vince, Garrett, all these guys, like you mentored them. And being at a leadership position in, I mean, Sixers and Clippers. So like, how do you lead like some of the best strength coaches, some of the best directors, some of the best staff in our field?
Yeah, well, all those names that you just named, I was really lucky to have those guys in my life for the periods of time that I did, and they brought great value to what we were trying to grow. You know, the processes that we were trying to grow out those performance training, those performance departments, and so I'm really lucky to have those people. I think that when you're talking about leadership. Um, I think that the acquisition piece to how you find those people, I think is really important. And I think there's certain characteristics that you really want to look for when you're trying to find those people. And so, you know, some of those are, I think we might have had this conversation at one point in time. I'm not sure if it was on the podcast or not, but like there's four things that I really value in people. And one is the ability to connect. I think we're in a people business, and so can those people connect with their teammates and can they connect with athletes? And I think those are the two big avenues that are really, really important if we're going to, you know, do it together and help our athletes, um, you know, get better. And so I think can they connect? I think, you know, evaluating their competency level and just learning if you know what their intelligence level is, right? And their skills that they've acquired over time. Um, but another trait that I really look for is are they competitive? Do they really feel like is winning important to them? Because we're ultimately in a business of winning. But lastly, I think the most important quality of acquiring those people is can they cooperate? You know, can you get find highly competent people that are great connectors, but can they cooperate? And at the end of the day, can they argue constructively? Can they use their intelligence to help uplift the group instead of intimidate the group? Um, and yeah, I think that those things are really important in understanding those things. So once you get those people on the bus, I think you know you're in a needs analysis of your departments of what's the most important thing, you know, what do those domain spaces need? And then I was really lucky to work for two organizations with, well, three. The University of Texas was, you know, unparalleled in giving us resources around the things that we really needed to improve. And then the Philadelphia 76ers did a great job of that. But the Clippers were unbelievable at giving us the resources needed for those people to improve their spaces. Um, and then you know, looking over time as you're defining those processes with them, you know, you're asking them what they really need to help grow those areas. And then are you always continually debriefing and learning through those processes? How are they doing? You know, what can we do better? Um, but it's ultimately at the end of the day, it's about a group of people in a team of people, and I feel really lucky in a lot of those names that you mentioned, and then some that I've been really blessed to be around some awesome people that have really helped our teams become better. You know.
Yeah, yeah. And like I think uh I what I learned from them is like being a good being a good human being, don't be an asshole. Which I probably mentioned that to you. Like I was kind of an asshole before I met Adam, but like Adam is such an amazing person that like and that like inspired me. And he also mentioned like he learned that from you. So uh how do you like I mean in our industry, like we need to be like focused, super focused on certain stuff. And like all these people are so smart. Like, how do you manage like uh what's the right word? learn the new stuff? Like, how do you have the sense like, oh, this is probably gonna be really helpful to like our players or the players, and when nobody know that's gonna be helpful in the basketball space, if I'm making any sense.
Yeah, no, you're making sense. I think one of the, leaderships and quality is that you have an amazing growth mindset. And I think that goes back to the competency piece that we were talking about. I think in the interviewing process, you want to overturn, do those people have great growth mindsets, right? Like, are they constantly learning their skill sets at an elite level, on a high level? Um, but I think you hit a good point. Like, you talked about, like, these are really smart people. I think great leaders hire people that are much smarter than them in those domain spaces, and they don't fear, they're not scared of that. And you try to learn from them. And that's where I've been really blessed, is like in nutrition and sports science. Like, I always had a background in movement, in performance training, right? And so that's where my domain really lied. But um, I was always really curious about those other spaces to learn, and having those leadership opportunities, like the ability to learn from some of the best nutritionists all around the world, and the people that we've hired, and then the sports science space and the biomechanics space and all those things. Like, I wasn't that wasn't my domain area, and so the ability to learn from those people I thought was critical. But I think that I'll always remember this. I was at the NBA Summer League, and I was at the medical conference, and there was a speaker there. His name was Vivek Shah, I think his name was, and he has a company called Infinite Potential. But he showed a clip of Ted Lasso, um, the scene where they're throwing the darts, and it's basically it's the big scene that comes out where it talks about, be curious, not judgmental. And I think that we all have biases in our areas that can start to make it borderline judgmental, and where you're like, I know this, and like, no, like, don't. I think it's your mindset and how you look at what's out there to learn. And um and so I think be curious, not judgmental, is a key piece in growing your space, right? And culture's about how we're going to act together as a group, and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And as the leader, you have to kind of lay those guardrails on, like, how we're going to argue points constructively. And when the behavior doesn't align correctly, you have to correct those behaviors to make sure that you manage, because that space is probably the most critical space for us to problem solve. Is, can we all get in there and argue these things out in a constructive way to find the solution? But sometimes egos can start to get angry, and like, and okay, cool. I'm okay with a certain amount of tension, but there's going to be a constructive way in which we do it. Um, and ultimately, at the end of the day, I want the room to be really curious and not judgmental. But the other piece, Eric, that I think is important in regards to leadership, is that you define that the process is going to be, there's going to be a lot of people involved in the process, and your points are going to be valued. But ultimately, at the end of the day, someone has to make the final decision. That part of high performance, I think, is really, really important, because if you're going to protect your culture, at the end of the day, all those people in the room have to understand that they were valued, but a decision was made. We're going with this decision. How do you handle that? And that, I think, is really important, because if you leave the room and you're bickering to your teammates, you know, like, that's going to be problematic for a high performance setting. Can you leave the room and be okay that we didn't go with what you said? And I think defining that, I think, is really, really important at the start of what expectations are and how we're going to handle conflict resolution and problem solving. So it's a long way around your question, but it was an awesome question. I think you want the best people that you can in the room, but how do you get to the endpoint that you find the solution to the problem.
Nice. This is awesome. This is awesome. All right, I'm gonna jump in the next topic. As you know, like basketball are heading towards this, moving toward this biomechanics realm. And we had this conversation before, and I feel like one of the reasons that you're able to help a lot of athletes or able to like be a really early adapter to the whole biomechanics is probably because your understanding or your knowledge of like the chain reaction biomechanics or applied functional science. So talk to me about like how you combine like applied functional science or chain reaction biomechanics to like the lab setting.
It's a great question. I think that the biomechanics lab space has an opportunity to really help our field moving forward. Um, I think that the the early adoption to strategies has been slightly um, there's been a reductionist view to it, and so the chain reaction biomechanics of applied functional science. When I think of chain reaction biomechanics, I think of a couple of things. One, I think of what Gary and Dave Tiberio would call FMF, right? Functional muscle function. Like, what does the actual muscle, where is it attached? Understanding the functional anatomy, what joint lines does it cross, but what does it actually do in movement, right? And I think that there's been a big gap in traditional learning of what the muscle actually does versus in function in applied functional science, what it really does. And that lens helped me definitely think about biomechanics differently. Um, I think that the truths to human movement, the scientific principles to human movement, that the primary drivers of ground reaction, mass momentum, and gravity are the three truths to what really drive us. And so the ability to capture you know, with those primary drivers is really important. But the biggest one is, you know, human movement is three-dimensional, right? And it is a chain reaction and it's transformational, right? Like at some point, a joint has to come to a particular part of a slowdown before it loads and it explodes out. So these truths to human movement, the scientific principles, I think should drive the strategies of what we're trying to accomplish in the biomechanics lab. Well, I think what happened is, there's certain hats that you wear in performance. In the biomechanics space, their job is to create the most reliable and valid data possible. And so with that, you start to eliminate variables, to try to create the consistency and reliability of the data. Well, that's not what the game is. The game's really highly variable. And so when you start to look at chain reaction biomechanics, you start to think about vector-based movement, whether it's a vertical vector or whether it's an anterior vector or anterior lateral vector. But those chain reaction biomechanics change dramatically from a vertical vector. And so the majority of our data collection has been very vertically based. I'm not saying that it doesn't give us data that could be good, but it's very short-sighted to think that a vertical displacement is going to carry over to an anterior displacement. The other big thing about biomechanics and chain reaction biomechanics is I think speed and load really change how a movement pattern would happen, right? So if I just lunged anteriorly onto a triaxial vertec plate, those forces would be measured differently, right? The joint angles would be, I would be able to, this concept of I mean, compliance and stiffness, right? And it's just like the Goldilocks of these two components to create a very efficient movement. But if I moved faster, those things change. If I moved with load, they would change. And so I think asking all these questions, the biomechanics space isn't there to tell us what to do. It's there to tell us a story. and for us to examine the story on how we can banter as biomechanists, as medical professionals, as performance specialists, that how do we help this athlete get from where they are right now to where they want to be? And a lot of those are, when I look at the biomechanics space, I think using it to understand pain, like in dysfunction. And then obviously there's a performance aspect where, I think we were at the Altus Summit with each other, and I think Dan Paff said a great thing about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, right? And I was like, that's a really cool component because we've had athletes before with patellofemoral issues that you get them on a plate and they do an anterior leap where both feet are in the air at one point in time. It's basically a plyometric lunge. And their response time off the knee that has the patellofemoral issue is actually faster. Their performance is better, but when you look at the joint angles, they don't get into great depths. And so you're looking at it, is it effective or is it efficient? Like they've adapted. These guys are the world's best adapters. And so now you're able to at least engage in conversation with a performance step. Is this something that we want to change? Like just because he was faster out of the dysfunctional side, do we still want to get more compliance out of the joint and be able to get more range? Or maybe he'll never get the range. But the cool part is that we're at least engaging in the conversation in those parts of the story to try to come up with a solution. So I do think that the chain reaction biomechanics is really important. And I think the NBA has done a great thing in regards to putting this protocol in place. The protocol is very reductionist. It's not what the game is really about. It's gonna give you some data, but to think that that data over time is going to tell a story that is going to help our athletes become better, I think is very short-sighted. So I feel lucky that you visited our space when we were with the Clippers. We designed these spaces that we were able to capture triaxial forces in training, like during training. So there was testing data and there was training data. And those things started to tell us more of a dense story and allowed us to engage in better conversations. I think that in our biomechanist, Sam Zeff, is crazy curious, not judgmental. And I think he's broken some of the bonds of the traditionalism of how to look at biomechanics. And he's really helped our staff, grow. So I'm hoping that the field kind of evolves and pushes into that space where they understand chain reaction biomechanics a little bit more. And I think it would help the biomechanics space grow exponentially.
Hmm. Just to follow up this topic, uh, you work with Adam Virgil, Sam Zell.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, those guys are smart, like crazy smart.
crazy smart. I,
But uh, they all said the same thing. Like before they work for you and after they work for you, you help them grow a lot. You help them understand like movement, context, not just like training, not just data collection. So talk to me a little bit about that. Like they were like some of the best sports scientists. They were some of the best like biomechanists, but like understanding the context of basketball, understanding the context of human movement, help them change their way of like looking or interpreting data.
well, I'm really lucky to have. I had Adam Virgil for a long time, and Adam was when I go back and try to connect the dots on why I thought the Clippers, why we built one of the strongest staffs in the NBA, which I really felt was true. I thought the acquisition of Adam was critical. Our sports science department, it was good, and but there's a part to the sports science, the data collection is that data has to tell a story. And that story has to be able to get to all the major stakeholders, whether it's management, whether it's coaches. And if you put a certain document in front of somebody or visualization that doesn't tell that story quickly and simply, it's very problematic. Adam was, and what I've really learned from Adam was, which I had a little bit, but it was fun to be around Adam. Adam was always a guy that was asking questions. It wasn't like, this is what it is. This is what it is. He would ask the question, why? Why would we value that instead of this? And I thought that was a really cool um, relationship to have on the staff. And he really took that area and grew it exponentially. And truth be known, there's another name in there named Andrew Drossel, who was a young up and coming kid that just came out of school that was working for the Cincinnati Reds. And he went through the process of the talent acquisition piece. Did he check all these boxes? And he really did. He came on board with some skill sets in regards to Python and the ability to build things out. So the combination of those three guys, I thought, really took our sports science department to another level. And then, the 1080 technology came in as we moved into this new facility too. So the 1080 technology and taking in that data was, I thought, really dense data to tell the truth. Like how did this athlete accelerate on the anterior vector? How did they move laterally? Um, so we had all this data dropping in, but we were able to, take what we thought maybe was the most important to help the guys through. But I'm really blessed to have all those guys in my life because they were curious. They weren't judgmental and they really wanted to learn. And I think that it was a real good dynamic of of all of us together to get the best results possible.
Nice, nice. And I do agree with you. That's probably one of the best staff in the league.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. And it goes down to the people, like you said. It's all about people. The one thing I'm most proud of as I exited the Clippers is the group of people that we put together. I felt like it was one of the strongest, definitely in the NBA. And then
In pro sport.
in pro sport, I do. I really agree with that. Because I think that we could argue constructively, and they were great connectors. They were great growth mindsets, competitive as all get out. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we could cooperate to find ways to problem solve and create solutions for our players.
Nice, nice.
You know?
Um, I remember at San Diego when we were at Altus Speed Summit, like we were talking about this topic, and it's about fascia. And I think you brought up an interesting point that the way we used to look at fascia is probably not for everybody. Because the way we used to look at fascia is like, oh, superficial back line, superficial front line, lateral line, whatsoever. And you say like human bodies adapt to like the task we ask them to do. So maybe like uh and basketball players' fascia line is different than a track athlete, and it's different than probably a pole vaulter. It's probably different than a general population. Talk to me about like your thoughts on that. How did you come up with this idea?
Well, my background in applied functional science, and when you start to examine what human movement truly is, you know, I was learning in the early 2000s. And then we actually opened this business called Train for the Game, hence the name, right? Like you want to train for the demands of the game. What are the joint actions? What are the speed of those actions? What are the conditioning systems that the metabolic systems that you have to use in these sports? Well, at that time in the early 2000s, kind of everybody's kind of training generically, through just it was I didn't like the name strength and conditioning because it just was, we were moving a lot of weight in the sagittal plane and we were getting strong in one plane of motion. Um, but when I started to learn the fascial system in 2008, I was at a conference with Thomas Myers, and I was listening to Thomas Myers speak, and he actually had a tensegrity model, and he was teaching this, this component of tensegrity. In this, he's holding this thing, and he's teaching me how the sticks of the bones and all the elastics of the connective tissue, the ligaments, the tendons, and it basically connects this whole system together. And I was like, really? Like I was like, huh, this is kind of out there. And I bought his book and started reading on the anatomy trains and the lines. And when you start to look at the truths to the fascial system, like those scientific truths should drive how you think about the connective tissue. So, it's basically viscoelastic, it's omnidirectional. It's the it's the most nerve producing connective tissue has 8 times more proprioceptors than muscle. And so when you start to look at the tensile properties to it, like when you start to look at these things, you're like, huh. And then, when you understand that it's omnidirectional in nature and it's a spider web, you start to go back to the truths to movement, right? And so Davis's law and Wolff's law, like through mechanotransduction, the the movements that we decide to put the athletes through, they're going to lay down lines of collagen in those directions. So why would I not try to create a system that could help lay down the lines in the specific movements to the game of basketball? And so as you watch game tape and you watch those movements, the combination of understanding chain reaction biomechanics, what is happening in, Altus would call it a shape. If I just took a snapshot in that shape, what is actually going on in chain reaction biomechanics? Um, Applied functional science would call those transformational zones, where at the particular point of motion goes from eccentric into a load to concentrically exploding out. Well, it made me really watch game tape very differently and start to design systems that would support those movements specifically. I think where our field has gotten lost in, this fascia thing has really come flying in here in the last 5 years, and people are like, what's the difference between training and fascia training? And like, I think you got to look at the principles to fascia and then design your systems around. There's still a place for traditional training, but who are you training? What is the history? What is their injury history? Like, have they had multiple injuries? Like, and so you have this gigantic toolbox of tools, whether it's mobility and stability or power and strength, and you want to be able to go into the toolbox and use those tools accordingly for whatever the history of that. Number one, what is that athlete doing? How are you going to get them to perform better? But what's their history? And there's some guys that have had multiple surgeries. They don't need as much traditional. They may need more highly variable tasks to lay down better lines of collagen to support the entire system. The other piece in this tensegrity that I think a lot of people get lost in is I think you have to be able to evaluate the system as a whole. And so if I have a hip flexor that's exceptionally tight, how does it change my pelvic, tensegrity? And if I knew that somewhere in this one of these lines was had a bit had tension in it, how do I use a tool to go in there and change the physical characteristics to this part of the property so I have better tensegrity through the entire system? Um, and I think this is where we get really lost in understanding. Like we have to be able to find where that tension lies within the system if we're going to create efficient and effective movement. Um, and I think the science to the fascial system, it's so young. Like I think in the next 10 years, it's going to get even stronger. But I think the scientific principles to fascia should drive the strategies. I think the other big piece is understanding how to create tension in the whole system. And so when you look at human movement, Human movement can be driven from the ground up and can be driven from the top down. And the combination of these two can create maximal tension in a particular line. So if I move my pelvis in the frontal plane and I side bend with my torso from the top down, I can create maximal tension in my left lateral line. And so understanding the fundamentals from the angulations of the lower body and the angulations of the from top down, how you can target those particular lines. Um, the functional front line, the functional back line. I think those are lines that are really critical in human movement. But I think that if you just look at how to use the upper and lower body together to create maximal tension, you can lay down a lot of great lines of collagen to help support the system, and in return, help the athlete perform at a much higher level.
Mm, mm. Another thing you brought up is proprioceptor, which is also like a big topic in the I think at least the like last year. So, uh, I mean, it's hard when it comes to like fascia and proprioceptor because there's no technology can really track that. So, I guess when it comes to like training the proprioceptor, when it comes to like training fascia, how do you implement that into your training?
That's an awesome question. And so I think this is another space that our field sometimes can have an opportunity to get lost in because number one, the proprioceptive system is very complicated. It can be really, really hard to learn. And I'll be honest with you, I'm still really learning it. Um, but it's the truth though. I mean, it's the truth in how the system works. It is proprioceptively driven. I think when people look at fascia and we have all these influences out there, it's so random. Well, it's this you want the system to be highly variable. But when you're looking at people that are teaching it, it looks like random stuff. I like to use the term systematic variability. There's a way to organize it. And you just have to look at what the movement is and then think about the top-down driver and the bottom-up driver. How can I put these two together to accomplish something that would influence the functional front line? So, for example, if I were to lunge anteriorly with my right leg, I put a line of tension in the left front hip into hip extension. But if I had a viper or a medicine ball and I took that medicine ball and I threw it to the right, I would create a line of tension through the functional front line. Well, if that's the truth, why wouldn't I create a system on a daily basis that train that? And and so in our what we would classify as our loaded movement training, which we kind of stole from Michel Dalcourt to a certain degree, we've organized what these lines are. And we may do 1 or 2 reps with some submaximal load to specifically target that systematic variability. So can I do 2 reps to get the fascial sling from the right shoulder to the left hip? 2 swings. Go the other leg, 2 swings. Can I get the lateral line? Can I get the posterior line by going into flexion? We've organized the system to make sure we're hitting those things every day. And we would call those things, people would call those things microdosing. We would call them these things accumulation opportunities. And so it's an opportunity on a daily basis that if I went through this this routine every day for 5 to 6 minutes, that would accumulate over time into making fascial changes that would be more robust to help the athlete become more sturdy and be able to handle movement better. What I loved about the system was it subjectively, you know, could teach you where the function, where that movement may be deficient. And so Dan Paff does a great job. He has the coaching eye. I like to call it, do you see what I see? Um, do you see that when I posterior lunge that I have to bend in my right knee when I go backwards, right? That I can't post my leg and then drop down. Why is that? If I lunge forward with my right leg, how fast does the back butt cheek come back on that side, right? Versus the other side. Those are things that if I swing the Viper, can I rotate more to the right than I can to the left? When I rotate to the right, do I see the right hip elastically load and explode? Or am I just going through my lumbar spine? I think these are things that it takes a long time as a coach to understand these. But what I loved about the system is it gave you a subjective audit. Did this athlete need something different? So if you saw one of those things, you could take him out, put him into the cage, maybe FMR his right hip, FMR his right T-spine rotation, put him back into movement and see if he could integrate it all back together.
Nice, nice.
So systematic variability. Can you organize what are the motions to the sport? Can you come up with motions that you load that daily to accumulate, growth and adaptation? Um, and yeah, I think that that's where the fascial truths are should be taught is examining what the truth to what fascia is, and then looking at the movements to the game that you're playing. Can you come up with certain things that influence those lines from the top down and the bottom up?
Nice, nice. Um, Follow-up question. Like it's there's not a lot of research out there in terms of like the fascia line or like how you train the fascia. Not to mention like there's even less for the proprioceptors. It's just hard to like we just don't have that technology to like track those stuff. And guys, coaches like you, coaches like Dan Paff, coaches like Coach Boo, like you guys are like scientists, but at the same time like artists to like implement all these knowledge to explore and to help us like young coaches understand these stuff. So my follow-up question is, how do you balance like science and art to like to produce the best result?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that's a great honor that you threw me in there with those two names. Those guys are amazing coaches.
No, you are like the best out there.
No, you're very kind to me. I need to put you on payroll. But those guys are fantastic, and I love learning from those guys. On your podcast, I've listened to all their content, and it's been incredible. Um, the art and science piece, I think the science piece is the foundation in which you want to try to create your strategies, right? Um, the art piece in how you organize it, how you program it, but then the big piece is the behavioral science piece to how you connect with your athlete and how do you have an awareness of um, what they need for that day, right? Like, can you actually understand where they're at and what they went through, maybe the day before, how they're feeling. Um, and I think that's where the art comes in, is that you work really hard in the science piece and you're going to use data to try to help you have constructive conversations on how to move the athlete from where they are to where they want to be. But nothing more important than the art piece to it, how you communicate it, how you motivate athletes, how you actually coach it, right? Like how you coach is so critical. Like, and I think that that's where our field has an opportunity to grow also, is like if you're just sitting there watching an athlete do something, and this, don't get me wrong, there's certain times that you have relationships with athletes that may go 7 or 8 years, that they've mastered a particular skill. And so maybe sometimes less coaching can be better, but there's always something that you could be examining from set to set that maybe you could do slightly better. Um, but you don't have to coach it every set, right? There's a starting position. There's initial feel for what the action looks like. There's a closing piece to it as you finish that exercise, what it looks like, what it feels like. Um, And so being able to coach those things, I think is part of the art of what you're talking about. Um, and then just having a great feel for the athlete, how they learn. Like I like using the phrase, um, you know, what did you hear me say? And and sometimes you'll get feedback that like they don't know what you're saying. And so the ability to say it differently and try to connect with them, that's part of the art. I think that's important. Um, I think that you have to have great flexibility as a human in the art piece, like because on any given day you could have a plan, and high performance is about chaos. It's like you're one cog in the wheel. So I think it's important to plan, but all of a sudden something, totally changes that plan. Are you that fixed on I have to do this plan? I think you have to have some pliability to yourself as a coach to say, this isn't what's best for the athlete. This isn't what's best for this team right now. I need to adapt. I need to change. How quickly can you do that on a fly, um, to do what's best for the athlete and the team? I think that's part of the science piece. I mean, part of the art piece.
Nice, nice. That's awesome. Um, Last question before I let you go. Um, Obviously, like you achieve a lot, you mentor a lot of like coaches. Uh, if you had a chance, if you have a chance to talk to like 22-year-old Todd Wright, what advice would you give to him?
You know what? That's another great question. I was so blessed at 22 because of this. When I go back and connect the dots on how I maybe got lucky to have the trajectory that I've had, and you've used the word mentor. So at 22, I made a decision to write letters to big time college football programs to learn to become a graduate assistant. And so I had the courage to write those letters, number one. Number two, I got an opportunity at the University of Clemson. And little did I know that I went there for football. And in the spring, I would meet a young coach named Rick Barnes, who was 38 years old, and I was 23. And Rick asked me to leave football and become his basketball only guy. And I was like, I don't know, coach. But he promised me two things. One was that there wouldn't be a budget put on me in regards to my continual education, that he would allow me to get any book, um, go to any seminar and learn. And then secondly, he told me that we would win at a high level and that we would win a national championship someday. And at that time, I was so young, I was so driven to learn about winning. So he kind of hooked me and I kind of jumped in. If I could give advice to 22-year-old people, have the courage to continually take your swings at what you really want. Um, be persistently polite. You've been amazing at this. The first time that you asked me to do this podcast, I just happened to be in a real busy time of my life. But every time I turned around, you were kind of there. Hey, can we do this? And I was like, I was attracted to it. I was like, this is really cool. This dude really wants to learn. And so I was like, hell yeah. I think that quality is one that 22-year-olds should really have. But the most important thing at 22 was my ability to learn. And I was learning at such a feverish pace that it was hard to organize everything. Applied functional science, Vern Gambetta's courses, like I was going everywhere. And how do you organize this into some kind of a training system? I thought was pretty important at that young age. Um, but if I look back to why I maybe had a chance, that young coach took me in, made me feel like I was going to be a part of something, gave me the resources to do it, but I was willing to do anything. I was going to do anything. If he asked me to walk his dog, I'd go do it. I wanted to learn. And so I wanted to bring value to him in any way, shape, or form that I could. And sometimes that lane isn't always It's not always linear. And so bringing value, bringing great energy on a daily basis, being an awesome teammate, but high performance is about positive energy. And and if you can't bring positive energy on a daily basis, you might be limited in the space. Um, but find great mentors early and be willing to take less money just to learn. And you know what? Sometimes there's going to be jobs that 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 you're gonna that you're gonna take that maybe are less money, but they're better opportunities because you're gonna have a chance to grow. Um, but yeah, if my 22-year-old self, I would say have the courage to take your swings, but find great mentors, take less money, learn crazy, but bring value. Like make those people's lives easier. And and I think good things will most likely happen because good people attract other good people. And that's where I was really lucky. It was a chain reaction, you know. I met a great coach that was always pushing me to get better, taught me the game of basketball from the tactical side, shared all those things with me, and then we spent 21 years together until I was ready for another challenge. The last 11 years I've been around two great organizations, and I was just at the point that I'm ready for another challenge. But I've been blessed to be around some amazing um, coaches and leaders and mentors, and then learn from some of the best people in the world. Um, so that's how my trajectory went. But if I went back to 22, have the courage, you know, go find great mentors and create great value for those people. And in return, most likely great things are going to happen for you.
Nice, nice. That's amazing. I appreciate you, Todd. That's all the question I have for you.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Keep it up. Keep it up. I mean, I'm listening to your stuff every week and you work, man. You're an elite worker because I don't know how you find time to do all these podcasts on top of you being, I know you're a great tactician at what you do. Um, but yeah, keep it up because you're really helping me get better too.
No, I appreciate you, Todd.
I appreciate you, brother.
All right, I'll let you go, but I'll definitely reach out to you again. All right.